Brandel, what's your reaction to what you heard from Tiger and his inability to go this week?
Well, I think what really stood out there was his respect for the traditions of professional golf, his fellow players, and the integrity of competition. That he could easily, if he wanted to, hop in a golf cart and cruise around and hit all the shots necessary to likely, compete in this event at a fairly high level and certainly entertain the world. But the integrity of the competition was just far too important for Tiger Woods to do something like that. So I think that spoke volumes about his respect for the history of this game.
Brandel, when you heard him say that he can hit any shot you want him to hit, he just can't walk, and then he later said, I don't have a lot left in this leg, talking about his major schedule next year, 4 majors, maybe 1 or 2 other events, doesn't give you a lot of hope that we're going to see an awful lot of Tiger Woods going forward, does it?
No, not really. It doesn't, Eamon. Look, I'll go back to what was it, 21 months ago, 1 year, 9 months ago when this accident happened. Shortly thereafter, I would have talked to a handful of orthopedic surgeons who specialize in the injuries that Tiger would have likely incurred in this accident. Several of them said to me that the most important element of this accident, in their opinion, and again, this is going off of the knowledge that they've had of previous accidents like this, not specific details, because those were not really known about the injuries that Tiger Woods incurred, but they all talked about this one particular bone in his right foot called the talus bone. And they said, look, if there was a clean break in that bone, they could piece it together, it would heal up nicely, and he'd be able to carry on fine. The foot wouldn't swell, he'd be able to go, he likely wouldn't even limp. But what was more likely was that that bone became fractured in a great many pieces, and so that they couldn't piece it back together, and subsequently it would never heal properly so that he could walk around without it swelling and causing arthritis at some point very early in his career. So as Tiger Woods was talking, and as this year has unfolded, I've gone back to those discussions that I've had with the orthopedic surgeons, and I thought, them sort of reading between the lines, I felt like they nailed it. They absolutely nailed it. And again, Tiger hasn't been particularly transparent about the injuries, the full scope of the injuries that he incurred in that accident. But in their opinion, it was likely that the talus bone shattered, and that going forward, he would never be able to walk a golf course sufficient to the degree that he would need to be competitive.
Because of that, Brandel, and you're right, we don't know everything. He doesn't tell us everything. Jack was counted out late in his career, Hogan, Muhammad Ali. Where are you with Tiger in terms of his ability to still do great things in this game, or has that page been ripped out now?
Look, Tiger's always raised our expectations and then exceeded them. We could go through that list. I certainly didn't think he was going to win twice in 1996 when he came out. I didn't think after watching that he would win by 12. I didn't think he'd win 4 majors in a row, one of them by 15. I didn't think in 2005 to 2009 he'd have a higher winning percentage than he did in 2000. I could go on and on. I certainly didn't think he'd come back and make the cut in 2 majors this year. So I didn't think he'd come back from his chipping issues to do the things that he's done. So he's never, ever ceased to absolutely astonish the golf world, and certainly including myself. So I wouldn't put it past him to come back. It seems like the right thing for him to do. What would be motivating him? He may say it's 18 majors, but to me, it seems like it would be 83. But I think in the broader sense, what Tiger and what this year has really meant to the game of golf is watching Tiger grow into this leadership role. And he may well prove to be the equal or maybe even greater leader than he was in terms of the history going forward of the PGA Tour, in terms of just the success that his playing skills brought to the PGA Tour. You look at the leadership of Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy, in terms of leadership. I mean, and then you look at the drama that's going on in the golf world. What's over here at LIV and what's competing, because it is competition with the PGA Tour. And, the PGA Tour and in golf, I think it's very fortunate to have a great many good leaders, great leaders. You look at the commissioners and Jay Monahan and Molly Marcoux Simon. You look at the head of the different governing bodies, to Seth Wall, to Michael Wan, to Martin Slumbers, to Greg McLaughlin, to the chairman of Augusta National. Chairman Ridley, you look at all those great leaders that they have, and under that leadership, the game has evolved in a great way. But you look at Tiger and Rory, the role that they're going to play, because they're both very bright. They have great respect for the traditions of the game and the integrity of competition. I mean, from a leadership standpoint, you're looking at FDR and Reagan, and that's who's leading from the player standpoint, the PGA Tour. Great leadership. And you look at LIV, and you could say, well, at least in my view, it's more like Abbott and Costello. And sadly, you look at the animosity that Greg Norman brings to the proceedings, the lawsuit that LIV is bringing in the competition that they're up. And you think, okay, golf is very lucky to have all this great leadership. And at its helm is Tiger Woods. And again, he may prove to me more to golf as a leader than he did as a player.
On that leadership question, Brandel, were you surprised, given how Tiger's avoided generally for most of his career contentious subjects or particularly outspoken points of view, that he was as direct as he was in echoing what Rory McIlroy said, that Greg Norman has got to go?
Look, no. As a player, and I could always appreciate this about Tiger. As a media member, of course, I always wanted more out of him when he was talking, and him to have a bigger leadership role in terms of his voice. But I always certainly appreciated his strategic, and I would call it strategic, stance that he took with the media, which was he never wanted to say something that would come back and have to distract him from his larger goal of dominating professional golf. So these are two different roles. As a competitor, I think it was very important for him to stay focused on the task. Golf is much more of a mental game than it is a physical game. And so Tiger didn't need the sort of the mental fatigue of jumping over existential hurdles. But now as a leader, I think Tiger, from an intellectual standpoint, can take on the roles. You know, Greg Norman is not the most conciliatory figure. And if you're looking at what LIV might need to grow into a legitimate tour, it needs a lot. There's a lot of hurdles there. But at least, at bare minimum, it needs a conciliatory leader. And then, of course, it needs to actually show reform. Whoever the leader is, the CEO, it's just a titular head. The leader is MBS. And until he actually shows reform, the world of golf is going to be very reluctant to put their arms around this. And I'm talking about reform, and they got to end their bombardment and embargo in Yemen. They've got to end their persecution of women, the male guardianship role. They got to end that. They got to end their persecution of gays. The conversion of Islam to another religion is still legally punishable by death. These are a clash with modernity that MBS could bring about. That's real reform. We're not seeing that. It's unlikely that we will see that. And I think that's at the bare minimum. I would agree with Tiger and Rory that they need a more conciliatory leader, but that's the bare minimum. There's so many other hurdles that LIV needs before it's legitimized as an entity in the world of golf.
Tiger did talk specifically about players who'd gone to LIV. Without naming names, he said he had a problem with people he thought had either disrespected or disregarded the PGA Tour on their way out the door. He used the word tasteless to describe some of those comments. He was then invited by Mark Cannizzaro of the New York Post to consider whether or not Phil Mickelson deserved an apology of some kind for hastening this along, which is a pretty ambitious ask. But Tiger seemed pretty brutally dismissive of that, Brandel.
Well, look, I think there's nuance here, and I think Tiger's dismissal of it, I think, shows the nuance. People just want to focus on the money and the fact that the PGA Tour is playing for more money, and then say, okay, LIV brought about the improvement of the PGA Tour. But I think, and this is, I think, what's guiding Tiger and Rory and obviously those in opposition of LIV, at a bare minimum, when you're assessing your actions, at a bare minimum, the barometer has to be, will your actions bring about the harm, or will they help people? Will they harm people, or will they help people? If you look at the foundation of the PGA Tour, it's based in philanthropy, okay? The foundation of the PGA Tour is based in helping people. It's based in philanthropy. What is the foundation of LIV? Well, it's MBS. And I would say that the foundation of LIV is terrorism, both in terrorizing his citizens in terms of human atrocities and exporting Wahhabism. So the foundation of one, and if you're a part of LIV, in my view, if you're a part of LIV, is your participation in LIV, is it going to bring about the harm of, will it facilitate the harm? Will it further facilitate the harm? Or will it lead to helping others? And I would argue, and have argued, that by participating in LIV, you are facilitating the continuation of this terrorism, of these human atrocities. That's my argument. That's the way I see it. And I see it black and white. By participating in LIV, you are contributing to, as you say, Eamon, over and over, the reputational laundering, sports washing. You're helping to obfuscate the terrorism. You're part of the machine, in my view. If you play on the PGA Tour, you are part of a large philanthropic organization for the betterment of professional golf, for the betterment of competition, but more importantly, for the betterment of the societies where the PGA Tour, the Korn Ferry Tour, the PGA Tour Champions Tour, and all of their outreaches around the world go. Now, that's beyond money. There are some things money cannot buy. It's not just about money. It's about what is the foundation of the tour that you're playing on. So while on one hand, people want to easily look at LIV and say it's elevated the PGA Tour. I've never said that the LIV's not competition. It is competition. It's just not capitalism, okay? And it's just not right. It's based upon sports washing, whereas the PGA Tour is based upon and founded by and guided by philanthropy. And that's the point where I would argue with Mark that he's missing, Mark Canizares, I would argue that his question misses the larger point of what LIV is about and what the PGA Tour is about. And Tiger's dismissal of it, I think, got to it in a pretty nuanced way.
Brandel, all of that said, we're also hearing Tiger and Rory say that there is a way forward between these two warring factions, that if the lawsuits are put aside and Greg Norman is pushed aside, that there is a way forward. Why do you think that is? Is it possible that the best players on the PGA Tour miss Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka and Patrick Reed and want to compete against the best at their best, like Jack and Tom Watson in '77, like Tiger and Phil and Duval in '01 at the Masters?
I read that really as just, look, this is a bare minimum. At a bare minimum, you have to have legitimate leadership, somebody that has demonstrated the ability to get their arms around this situation. And again, lawsuits need to stop. There needs to be some, hat in hand conciliatory gesture. Greg looks less like a CEO and more like a dictator or a wannabe dictator in that role to me. So at a bare minimum, but along the lines, again, set aside the fact that there has to be some actual reform in Saudi Arabia before golf puts its arms around that. Golf does, we go back to prior to the 1960, golf does have a blighted past in terms of its exclusionary policies, but those exclusionary policies were abolished in the 60s, but it took some time for them to dissipate. But you could say and certainly see under Tiger's reign, and there are, of course, many deterministic factors that contributed to this, golf has become far more exclusionary, inclusionary, far more diverse, far more of a global game. And that's, of course, gone lockstep with the leaders in the game. So why would golf want to take decades step backwards into a foundation that would be running the game? And I'm talking about running a particular part of the game, LIV Golf. You're talking about Saudi Arabia. Why would you want to go back into the dark ages of professional golf where it is run by discriminatory, exclusionary, and persecuting elements? Why would you want to take golf back to that spot? We're 60 years past that spot. But why do we want to take that step back there? Golf's come full circle to be diverse and inclusionary. And again, there are a lot of contributing factors to that, but Tiger's certainly one of them.
It's a great point you make, Brandel. Appreciate your insights as always. Enjoy your Tuesday, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.